Give us a formal introduction, boyo.
Formal introduction. Hello, everybody. I'm David. I suppose, and this is Xavier. He thinks,
That was fucking amazing. Good job.
and
All
we
right,
are
well,
here back at
this
Subject Change
week we got-
Offices.
we're back.
This is episode 4. And just so you know, next
Man,
episode will
feels-
be on Xavier's channel in a week. So the deal going forward is that every fourth one will be on his channel, and then the other 3 will be on mine.
Yeah, so that way we can make sure people
Know
don't
that this
forget
thing
it
is a thing.
exists if they didn't see that the first one was on my channel. You know,
Yeah.
it's very hard to get people incentivized to go to other channels if you
Just say go to that channel.
well, okay, go to your channel.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, go check out Couch Potatoes. It's on my channel this week. And everyone's like, no thanks.
No. Well, it gets
No.
about as many views as a typical Couch Potatoes does for me, so it's not exactly like it's going downhill or anything.
You know what? I think it's the same 300 people subscribed to both channels that watch that really consistently. And then there's the
363 views. 9 hours.
There's the other couple thousand, and they're
Mhm.
like, "Fuck you! Give us more Spider-Man videos." I'm like, "All right, hang on."
Perfect, yeah.
So, what have you been reading so far in the past?
So you have
little
nothing
while?
on this list, right?
What? Oh yeah, I mean I don't know. I've been so busy that I've been reading the first couple of issues of the Injustice comic. It's really cool to see like a scenario where shit goes wrong all across the DC universe.
Mm-hmm.
It's if you haven't played the game, it's a scenario where the Joker uses
Like
fear toxin
Injustice
mixed
1 or
with
Injustice 2?
the first one.
I played the game.
I was gonna read it for the game. Basically, it's where the Joker creates a scenario where Superman accidentally kills Lois Lane, and then he nukes Metropolis. And Superman gets so pissed off that he becomes a crazy dictator and takes over the world over the course of 5 years. And it's pretty neat so far.
Mm-hmm.
How about you?
So, yeah. The other day, you might have seen it on my Twitter, but Godzilla Mendoza
Twiddles.
here lent me an issue of Valerian and Laureline. And I just thought I'd mention that because I've been reading Valerian and Laureline even before he gave me that. So maybe I could talk a little bit about that
Well,
before the
now you
video
have
comes
one
out.
to like keep on your shelf.
Yeah. Valerian and Laureline is pretty fun, actually. It's kind of goofy and silly in that sort of 60s comic book way where all the characters talk to themselves awkwardly and introduce exposition in a really ham-fisted way.
I love expositional dialogue from old comic books because it's always just like, here's 6 paragraphs of me talking about something I already knew for no one in particular.
It's perfect.
Hey.
I love it.
I'm talking to David right now. Him and I used to go to school together, and one day we decided to start working on a YouTube channel together. And then he split off onto his own YouTube channel. He's in charge of the podcast now. My name is Xavier. I know all these things. The only person
And I know all
that's
these
for,
things.
the benefit for is for a reader who, according to the characters, does not exist. So it's just really silly to think about.
And also, like, the artwork in Valerian and Laureline is pretty gorgeous.
It's pretty great art, honestly.
It's pretty great
I
art.
skimmed through there a couple of times.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It's definitely early artwork. It's definitely a product of its time, but it looks cool.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny that basically this guy who was basically the biggest comic book nerd whenever Luc Besson was a kid, and then now he's making the movies, which I think is kind of cool.
I find that very inspiring, honestly.
Yeah.
I think it's cool. He was like, I'm going to read the hell out of this as a kid, and you know what? I think only I can make the live-action adaptation correctly.
There was an
so I'm gonna
animated
just sit on the
adaptation
product.
before this.
Well, really? When was that?
Like mid-2000s?
Huh. might have
I
to
don't
check
know how
that
to
out.
find it, because it's French and all that.
I'm sure someone dubbed it or something. But
Yeah.
we'll try and find a copy to watch together. For fun.
In terms of other things, eventually, I rewatched Prometheus last week to get ready for Alien Covenant, and I was bored and kind of confused, but also a little bit hypnotized by just how weird it is. I think
It's a perfect analysis of that movie. You're bored and confused, but you're also really into it.
yeah, and by the end, you just think, what the hell was that? But I don't know. I mean, I hadn't really watched it the whole way through before this, and I thought, well, might as well watch it once, and that's about all it deserves, honestly.
I think it's good as a precursor to Alien Covenant. I think it fits well with that movie on its own.
Also, speaking of Alien Covenant, go and watch Star Trek, because Lore and Data had the exact same relationship as Walter and David, except it's a lot more interesting because their creator is actually still alive, and they actually meet him in an episode called Brothers. So they kind of have a weird.
Did Lore ever go over to Data and then kiss him just a little? Just a little bit. Just kiss him a little.
He expressed the same sort of sentiment without the physical affection.
Oh, so he just gave him a crisp high five.
Something like that. And then the one last thing that I've been watching that I thought I'd like to talk about was Mad Max Fury Road. I pulled it on this weekend and I thought, boy, that was better than I remembered it to be. I was just fascinated by like how George Miller and company tell a story that's entirely through visuals and acting, almost entirely, and how these characters, like especially Max, who's kind of a loner and he's a weirdo and he's been by himself for many years, so he doesn't really talk a lot, how they build character and character development through nothing but actions. And like the way they interact and those visual cues and all that, and it's a masterpiece in that it takes a very simple story and develops it really effectively without you even knowing it.
Some good stuff.
And
well, that brings us actually to our larger point for the
Godzilla
episode.
Mendoza just left the call
because Tom Hardy, star of Mad Max and in my opinion a very great actor, has been cast as Venom in the upcoming 2018 Venom movie. This seems kind of out of nowhere. Like, I thought it would be like the same kind of like casting rodeo that it was for Cable, where like 90 actors are looked
Where
at.
are you?
And then,
Come on!
the media keeps getting a hold of it. But no, they just came out with it one day and said, "Yeah, here's our
Come
guy."
on! I can't do the rest of it by myself. Come on!
That's happened. I feel like.
What are you doing? What are you doing? Where did you go? Hello?
Stupid Discord cut out for a moment. Anyway.
Okay, good.
Yeah, just put in my audio of me talking at nothing while Discord glitched out. Anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, so
I was just
Tom
talking
Hardy,
about Mad Max.
Yeah.
And visual storytelling and all that.
Okay.
Because it's like a lot of people, like most people when they're watching movies don't really understand the language of movies. And I'm not sure that many people could explain the way this movie works in terms of the way they develop characters. Like they would say, "Oh, it's just a dumb movie with like cars and stuff," and they had characters, I guess. But
there was fight scenes that were cool.
There was a surprising amount of character development and visual storytelling that made this into something bigger than people think it is, but they don't really pick up on that, which is the interesting part of it. Because like it's the first action movie that both cinephiles and just the regular average moviegoer both like because of that.
Yeah, like it's not one of those divisive movies where critics think one thing and then the fans think a completely different thing. It's really just like
Both of them
everybody
like it,
all around went, yeah, this movie
but
works.
for completely different reasons, which I think is the funny thing about it. So I think with that, we're going to wrap up what we've been watching and reading and those sort of thoughts, and we're going to talk about next time Tom Hart. We're going to talk about a couple of featured news stories, and we're going to move on to some other stuff. First of all is the biggest story of the week if you're into comic books, which was some updates on Sony's Venom movie, which is set for October of next year. Now, they have, of course, it's been in pre-production for a while. They've been writing a script, but now they have a star and a director. Tom Hardy is attached to Star, who, of course, was in Mad Max. Hey, good segue. We just talked about him. And
Yeah.
Ruben Fleischer, who was the director of Zombieland, and he also worked on Santa Clarita Diet, will be directing. So we've got a weird comedy director do it, and a very, well, let's just say
he's very talented actor.
He's very he's also
works well with
fan-cast
playing a character. A lot of people were immediately like fan casting Venom all over the place, and a couple of them.
And no, he's not fan cast just
Hardy'd
as Venom. He's fan cast all the time. Like
people said he should play Punisher.
James
when
Bond.
It was announced that Marvel got the rights back to that. Some people were like, "Hey, he should play Wolverine
James Bond.
after." A lot of people wanted him to play Wolverine after Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, he's fan cast all the time. Now, and that's the funny thing that I think about this Venom is that it feels like fan casting, but good fan casting.
Yeah, where it's not just like who looks closest to the character visually. I think actually he could really pull off that personality.
And I think
so. I think it's a great choice.
He has the physical presence that I think could go cool for this character because, like, I haven't read that much of the comics, but from what I see is that he's a very bulky, big character. And that 70s show guy was not very physically imposing.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was fucking Topher Grace who played a notoriously skinny, weak character on a comedy show, and then they're like, let's cast him as this guy who, in his storyline, is supposed to be like an Olympic-level bodybuilder. You know, like, the whole idea is that the reason he's stronger than Spider-Man is because the suit gives him all of Spider-Man's strength plus his own, which happens to be a lot. So he's just barely tougher than Spider-Man in terms of just, like, sheer physicality.
Yeah. So I think that the fan casting is good, but the director puzzles me a little bit because, like, this is supposed to be, like, a serious, darker movie, right? Or can there be comedy with Spider-Man, with Venom?
Well, if you've read Lethal Protector, he's actually kind of like sarcastic and goofy in a weird way. Like, it's not necessarily as dark as I'm sure they'll go with it. I actually think they
can only go so dark with PG-13. So having some levity in there is kind of in the it's in the vogue for comic book movies right now.
Well, yeah, I think Venom actually is capable of having some lightheartedness to it. I mean, not too much, but it's
so we've
not
got
going to be completely dire and droll and sad. So
is that a good pick for you? Do you think?
Yeah, I think that director works because I like Zombieland because it's kind of like this mix of it's kind of like this mix of really heavy moments of, you know, talking about a zombie apocalypse and then just really fun, goofy scenes of them, like, running around just trashing a grocery store or, you know, playing at an amusement park or going to random celebrities' houses after the apocalypse has happened. Like, it's a mix of, like, fun and also a little bit of introspection. And also Santa Clarita Diet is, like, hilariously gory, but also very much, like, family-friendly in a way. It's such a weird clash of tone.
So that's what we're gonna get, hopefully, assuming that this guy keeps within his wheelhouse. And I remember one of the writers is credited for having worked on Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man 2, and then Avi Arad and Amy Pascal will be producing. So that's a little bit of concern right there.
Well, you see, the thing about Avi Arad is that he keeps ruining things because he insists that it have more venom, and he just wants everyone to keep writing everything so that it can lead up to more scenes with venom, or include him inappropriately in a story that doesn't really make sense.
Avi Arad produced the Ghost in the Shell movie that came out this year.
But I don't think that his problem with constantly trying to shoehorn venom into every Spider-Man universe necessarily is going to be a problem here, because, you know, how do you shove more venom into a Venom movie? You know,
and
I think
also he's going to be working
satisfied.
on the Uncharted movie with Tom Holland.
Yeah, that just got announced this morning. That was kind of weird. Where Tom Holland is going to be Nathan Drake, I guess.
He's going to be a young Nathan Drake, based on like the flashbacks in the third movie or third game. Okay, so hold on. I didn't actually get to read the article in time. I woke up and immediately tried to start the podcast. So I can pull up the article and I will read it to you to give you some insights. So this is from Deadline.com. Let's see. Sean Levy is directing a film that will take its inspiration from a sequence in the third iteration of the video game that focused on the young thief Drake and his first encounter with a professional rogue Sullivan.
Okay, so it's going to be a movie specifically about just the one flashback from the third game? Because, like, by the time we've met these characters in the first game, I would say, like, Sully's around, like, 55 and Nate's around, like, 30, and they've been, like their relationship is well established.
So it's going to be an origin story, then.
All right. And I don't know how I feel about Tom Holland being, you know, cast for that role, just because, like,
Tom Holland is in
Nathan
all the
Drake
Sony movies. Because he's in the Spider-Man movies, and now he's in this. So Sony really likes Spider-Man.
I guess he just likes... they just like seeing him climb things.
Uh-huh. So, yeah, that was an unexpected news story. We weren't planning to report on that, but hey, what do you think?
Yeah.
Sounds mildly interesting. But then again,
give it a shot.
Once again, Amy Pascal and Avi Arad producing.
Let's see. Sure. I'll give it a shot.
Directed by Sean Levy. No, not Amy Pascal. So it's produced by Charles Roven, Avi Arad, and Alex Gartner.
Okay.
And then directed by Sean Levy, the director of the Night at the Museum movies, and The Internship. So, yeah.
I think it has potential. I'd like to see what they do with it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a weird direction they're going with.
So it's got two curses against it right now. It's a Sony movie and it's a video game movie. So let's see if it can overcome that.
What if they cancel each other out? Like, that's what it takes.
Two wrongs do make a right.
Super doomed from the start and then accidentally work. Now, here's an idea about how this could be really cool. Is if it's not directly a remake of the video game in any way, but instead is actually just like a continuation of the flashback, like it shows like what happens after the flashback. I
think that's the idea.
And it'll be canon to the game series, because like those games are so cinematic already. I don't think remaking them as a movie would work. I think just telling new stories in that like universe with those characters absolutely could work. So if it's like the movie is canon to the game, sort of like how Assassin's Creed is an offshoot to the games, I think that would work.
So, yeah, that's interesting. And we've got one more story to report on, which is another story that just came out today, which is that the Universal Pictures Monster Movie Cinematic Universe is officially named Dark Universe. And we're going to talk about this because it's what Universal wants to do to challenge the supremacy of comic book movies, because they don't have a comic book property. Because Fox has the X-Men movies, Disney has Marvel Studios, Sony has Spider-Man and nothing else. And then, of course, Warner Brothers has Warner
DC.
Brothers has DC. So it's pretty much just Paramount and Universal that don't have comic book franchises, and Paramount
Of all
is
the big
kind of getting
studios,
set up
yeah.
with Akiva Goldsman and the Rob Liefeld stuff, with like Evangeline and all that.
What a horrible like short straw they drew. I mean, of all these comic book properties going around, everyone's starting their cinematic universe, and they get fucking Youngblood and Dark Wolf and shit like that. No, Blood Wolf.
But that's
and,
and that's not the point of this story, though. That's just something we can laugh at Paramount for, because they are colossally bad at making decisions. Like,
well, yeah, I can't wait to see them get worse.
be glad that there's Sony out there, so that you're not last place Universal, or rather Paramount. Universal's actually
There's
doing
someone
okay.
just slightly worse than you, but
Universal's
only
doing.
slightly.
It's because Universal is interesting because it's the biggest. It is what I consider to be the main rival of Disney in many ways, but it doesn't have a comic book movie franchise. It has the Fast and the Furious movies, which recently notched the biggest global opening of all time. It has the Jason
Very
Bourne
impressive.
movies. It has 2 animation divisions now, DreamWorks and Illumination Entertainment, and of course, it's got. Of course, it tried to have a video game movie with Warcraft, but failed. So it's the biggest non-comic book movie studio, and that's interesting. So,
Well, I mean, I guess the idea right now is that it's like I imagine some producer just scrolling through the "What do we got" files, and then was like,
their intellectual property files, and then of course,
Yeah.
if you don't know,
hey, we have all kinds of movies about monsters.
Yeah.
We could have
Like-
Frankenstein and Dracula
well,
and the Mummy
here's
hang out.
because if you don't know, back in like the 1930s and the 1940s, Universal was the king of horror movies with like all of these classic horror tales.
And it was a shared
as
universe, which was impressive.
And
all
it was
those movies, for
they
the
are
most part,
they're-
connected to each
They're
other.
still iconic. Those are iconic horror movies to this day, and they're gonna
Yeah.
revive that to their cinematic universe, which they're calling Dark Universe. And of course,
Well,
they've
it's
also
not their first time doing it. They kind of like pioneered the whole concept of like, all right, so the Wolfman from this movie will go hang out with the Frankenstein of this movie. Like there was all kinds of cool crossovers back then.
and they're gonna
I don't
do it
think they were,
again.
Like
And
really
here's
doing it on
the
purpose.
official like principal cast of this franchise so far is going to be Johnny Depp as the Invisible Man. Can't wait for him
which
to
is
mug.
hilariously ironic
Yeah,
considering his current career.
Javier Bardem as Frankenstein's monster. Johnny Depp and Javier
No, I
Bardem are of
originally-
course
as
appearing
soon as I
together
heard that,
this week
I-
in Pirates 5. Tom
As
Cruise.
soon as I heard that Javier Bardem was going to be Frankenstein's monster, I immediately like kind of like squinted my eyes and raised an eyebrow, and then I went, "Huh, that actually could work."
Yeah, Javier Bardem is a good actor. In fact, I'd say he's the best actor amongst all of these because the rest of the cast is Tom Cruise as Soldier of Fortune Nick Morton, whoever that is. Sofia Boutella
I'm
as
sure
the mummy.
we're gonna go look up that guy's name and find out he's some old like, monster movie character
Do it.
or something like
Google
some
Nick Morton.
random side character from a Mummy or Dracula book who
And
gets powers or
And
something.
then there's Sofia Boutella as the mummy. Sofia Boutella, she's a very good physical presence, but I don't think she's that good of an actress. And then
well, that's why she's playing a mummy, which is a weird mute monster covered in bandages.
and then Russell Crowe is playing Dr. Henry Jekyll. And it is Dr. Jekyll's a mysterious multinational organization, Prodigum, that connects all the titles in the Dark Universe. For example,
Do you think,
their mission is to
like,
track, study, and sometimes destroy evil monsters. So basically think...
like S.H.I.E.L.D.
Fantasy
but-
Shield.
Yeah. Well, I'm wondering about Jekyll. Is he gonna, since they're going for like more of an action movie twist, how are you gonna make a mummy scary? Like, instead they're just having it like blow up the city with its mind. So I was thinking like, how could you do like the cool kick-ass action version of Dr. Jekyll? And I'm thinking like, it's gonna be pretty similar to that version of him from League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, the movie, where he's basically just the Hulk.
Mm-hmm. So we're gonna see how this comes out in the future. It's an interesting experiment, I'm gonna say, and it certainly got my attention more than the Paramount does with their Transformers cinematic universe. Boy, am I so excited for Bumblebee's solo movie.
What the fuck would that even be about? Does it take place on Cybertron? Because at that point it would just be like an animated movie. Or
apparently,
if
the script has a lot of buzz. Apparently, like in the business, they have a lot of the script has a lot of buzz, and it's apparently really good. But I wouldn't know for sure.
I mean, it's about a Camaro that's a man. You know what would be interesting is if Bumblebee is the only Transformer in it, and the villains are all humans, and then at one point one of the humans attacks him with all kinds of weapons that are good at hurting Transformers.
They're good at Transformers.
No giant robot fights. It's just it's Taken, but Liam Neeson's a car, and he's 19 feet tall. And that's the movie.
So
he goes
dumb.
all over the world driving around, and he's got to get Sam Witwicky back, and he's blowing up all kinds of terrorists.
That
and
is
he's
so
jumping out
dumb.
of helicopters.
This
no,
is
no,
so
like he drives
dumb.
out of the back of a moving plane and then transforms on his way down. And does a superhero landing on a terrorist and explodes his guts out of his fist.
This
And
is
he's
terrible. Stop it. Stop.
And then he
please.
shoots a laser.
Please, no more.
No, that's great. Someone animate that.
So, next up is our friend Xavier's next thing. On the comments for the last one, we got a comment asking us to pitch a Spawn movie, and that's rather fortuitous because we've had a plan now for a while to do a thing on here called Movie Pitches, where we just pitch our version of a movie whenever we have, like, an idea or an inspiration based upon what's out at the moment. So, hey, let's do it.
Well, after reading a couple of the comics and watching the HBO animated series for Spawn, I kind of feel like a lot of the interpretations of him following the books are going to be Todd McFarlane trying as hard as he can to make sure Spawn is not the main character, despite being the title of the story. In fact, most often it's like kind of the focus is switched off to these two detectives, Sam and Twitch, just because they're they have kind of a fun dynamic. And honestly, I don't think that's like a really great idea. You have a guy who's like possessed by a demon suit who can, shapeshift into nearly anything. He can teleport through shadows. He's an ex-mercenary with burned skin who runs around shooting people and living in an alley and scaring hobos. And you want to make the main characters not that guy. So I think the focus overall should be on Spawn, of course, since that's surprisingly a unique take. And I would definitely focus on the I think I would do it very similarly to the HBO series, at least the first season anyway, where it's mostly focused on the crime syndicate and the political red tape and everything that Spawn kind of got wrapped up in before he was killed. So it's this giant government conspiracy where there's this corrupt politician trying to make sure everything goes his way, and along the way he assassinates some random merc who comes back from the dead in order to rip apart his crime syndicate. And that's the sort of thing I'd go for. Instead of just here's a random murder mystery in New York, Spawn may or may not show up at some point.
And there's one thing that I do want to say is that because this is a 90s comic book movie property, the one thing that I want is that I want it to look like a 90s comic book movie, specifically the Alex Proyas style 90s comic book movie like The Crow. I want it to have
that would be a great art
visual
style
aesthetic. So if we can have a director to do it, I'd say Alex Proyas.
If you look at Spawn, the way Spawn is illustrated, it's a lot of browns and reds and blacks all over the screen. It's a lot of really dark shades in the way it's colored.
And hey, Alex
I
Proyas
think that would
made a
translate
movie
to a
Dark
cool.
City.
Yeah, I think that if you gave it a Dark City or The Crow sort of spin in visuals, it would totally fit.
And I think, I don't know, I mean, I haven't read enough of the comics to say anything else, honestly, because I don't really know that much about Spawn. I haven't watched the show, I haven't done anything.
Spawn is a very conflicted character because he spent 5 years dead, came back, and don't remember any of it. He no longer has a face. He's got all kinds of weird, spooky powers, and is very far off from being a human.
So
and
basically,
his first reaction is that he wants to go back to his wife, but he finds out that she's moved on and has a daughter and a new husband, and now he's just kind of like sulking around, wondering what he's gonna do because he just came back a little too late.
Okay, so
and
basically,
there's
just
like
make,
there could be some like existential dread.
So basically, just make the Crow kind of mixed with like Dread.
Yeah, but perfect. No, that's great. you nailed it.
So the plot would be sort of like a crime syndicate thing that he gets sucked into, and then he like journey to self-identity and all that. Would the clown guy be in there as well?
Yeah, he's the Violator / the Clown. He serves like a purpose of being like the devil on Spawn's shoulder, constantly standing over him, telling him what he should and shouldn't do, in order to appease the devil. While as Spawn is like, no, I don't want to be. Spawn's whole thing is that he doesn't want to necessarily serve God or the devil. He wants to make his own path in life. And he wants to create his own destiny, and he feels like he's constantly being used as a pawn from either side. While as, with the side of the Holy, he has this other guy named Cogliostro, who's a guy who used to be a Spawn himself, like a member of the Devil's Army, and was able to break the curse and return to being a human. And he just kind of lives around New York, trying to help Spawn stay on the straight and narrow and make sure he doesn't do anything too bad. While as the Clown is constantly, whispering to him, hey, you should kill that guy, And it would be kind of cool to see how he, interacts with those two characters more than, not at all.
So it would be it'd be like a weird supernatural guy with this weird supernatural supporting characters and a very real world context, is what you're saying.
Yes, that's exactly Spawn. It's 3 very strange characters from very supernatural settings in the middle of a lot of real world politics and real world problems.
Okay.
Just kind of interacting with.
Just as long as people don't have too many pretentious conversations about morality and all that stuff. Just keep
Mr. Wayne.
Just keep Christopher Nolan's fingerprints off of it, okay?
Don't let yourself be turned to the dark side by the Joker. Some people just want to see the world burn.
Just keep Christopher Nolan off of it, and it will be better.
Hey,
and then, of course, with a section where
a better choice than Todd.
Of course, with a section where Xavier talks a bunch, it's time for me to talk a bunch. Now, yay! As everybody knows, the Star Trek Discovery trailer came out last week, and I have a video coming out that's sort of a breakdown to my response to that. But here, I'm going to have something a little bit differently, where I'm going to talk about Star Trek Discovery and its place and the future of the Star Trek franchise, because it's very interesting. It's at a bit of a crossroads right now. So, as you all know, Star Trek Discovery will be coming out later this year, and CBS upped the episode order for the first season from 13 to 15 episodes. So we're going to have a bit of a longer Star Trek-style season with that. And it takes place 10 years before the original series, Kirk, Spock, and all that, the stuff that people who aren't Star Trek fans will still recognize. And that, I think, is what Viacom and CBS are hoping is the primary, the flagship Star Trek brand going forward. Because if you don't know, the movies kind of fizzled out. For example, Star Trek Beyond grossed about $100 million less than Star Trek Into Darkness. So, yeah, we're totally going to see a fourth J.J. Abrams Star Trek movie with Chris Hemsworth, box office poison, back as Kirk's dad.
Yeah. There's been a lot of weird news about what they're gonna do with the sequel, and not a whole lot of it makes sense. I think they're just kind of.
Yeah. J.J.
It's
Abrams
the same
said
as with
that,
the Amazing Spider-Man franchise, where as soon as it was starting to tank, they started announcing a million projects
like
didn't
J.J.
seem
has said
good.
that the next movie is gonna. There's a really good pitch apparently, he wants to bring back Chris Hemsworth as Kirk's dad. Because if you don't know, before Chris Hemsworth was Thor, before he was a Marvel character, before he was even in Ghostbusters, he was in Star Trek 2009, where he played Kirk's dad for 5 minutes and then he died.
It was a very important character who did a lot and contributed greatly to the lore.
It kind of annoyed me, honestly, to have that character in there, because daddy issues was never something that Kirk really dealt with in the original show, so it felt out of character for him to suddenly have that. Like, a lot of the more interesting...
The idea was that he was a lot younger, and, like, the Kirk that we see in the TV show had already dealt with all of that, like, and had been past it, but I mean, they were like, here, let's, reel it back a little.
In the original movies, especially, because that was like 20 years after he was in the show, and he was like, he was getting up there, he was in his 50s. So the movies dealt a lot more with him aging, and like, especially Star Trek 2 and Star Trek 6, the movies directed by Nicholas Meyer, they dealt heavily with issues of aging, of wondering whether you're still a productive person, of wondering whether you're still able to do the things that you were as a younger person,
as a younger man,
and dealing with the prejudices and the issues that you might have as the world changes around you.
Yeah,
and that's a lot more interesting. So if you ask me, I don't want any more J.J. Abrams movies. I think we need to step back from the movies and don't. Here's my main problem with the J.J. Abrams movies is that they're reboots of Kirk and Spock. And we've already seen Kirk and Spock, and there were already a lot of really bad and a lot of really good Star Trek movies starring Kirk and Spock.
They were very well fleshed out characters. We saw pretty much everything about them at one point or another, including the TV show.
We liked them.
It's just, yeah, but why not just make a new cast of characters that's iconic?
But the problem with making
they did it successfully like 4 times prior.
But the problem with making a $200 million movie for mass audiences is that if you slap the Star Trek name on it and there isn't Kirk and Spock, then they're gonna think, wait, what? What? How's this? What? Star Trek?
Fuck, why do you have a Star Trek movie without Kirk and Spock, bro?
Where are they? Can't have a Star Trek movie without Kirk and Spock.
Even though they had like 10 of those.
So, if you ask me, I think Star Trek needs to go back to its low-budget TV roots. Like, I'm not, like, even lower budget than the CBS All Access show. It just needs to be a little bit more in that traditional sense. And the other thing is that it needs to move forward. That I don't think that the Star Trek Discovery, if you ask me, is a bad move because it's a prequel, and that inherently limits what you can do. So
yeah,
I think
they can't discover any new crazy awesome stuff that hasn't been explored before, because then how come the other captains didn't see it?
Yeah. So you're gonna you're really limited by what you can do with the prequel, especially when you're boldly going where no one has gone before. So it needs to move forward. New shows in the future. Like, there was a great pitch in, like, the mid-2000s that I've since forgotten about that was an alternate pitch to the Star Trek 2009 to reboot the series. I'm going to look it up. I'm going to see if I can look it up so I can see it.
Now, while you're doing that, I'll ramble a little bit here. If you ask me, I feel like if you wanted to go back and do old Kirk and Spock movies again, I would have gone even younger and had them, like, 18 and, like, make it more of a coming-of-age story and less of, like, here's some 30-year-old guy and here's some other 30-year-old guy, and then they accidentally end up being Kirk and Spock. Like, it just felt a little... They didn't feel young enough for the way that they were trying to handle it, but they didn't feel old enough that they could be the old Kirk and Spock from the TV show. So it was just kind of like this weird gray zone of like, you know, does this story work for these like actors? And I think if you reeled it back just a little bit and had them both like meet when they were like 19 and be like best buddies, and then go on a young Star Trek adventure, it would be more interesting to see them grow into the ones that you saw from the TV show and less of like, here's an alternate version of that. Right?
So,
like,
let's see. If
I would have gone
here-
full prequel.
So let's see. I found it. I think I found it. So in the mid 2000s, after Star Trek Enterprise fizzled out, they were Paramount, because this was back when Paramount and CBS were under the same roof, were hearing pitches from different people to see like different ideas, and then this is a pitch that they had in the 2000s, which was the main competitor to J.J. Abrams' pitch, which was which included Christopher McQuarrie, director of Mission Impossible 5 and also writer of a bunch of cool stuff like Edge of Tomorrow, and Bryan Singer were also attached to this at this time. And it was been called Star Trek Federation, which I think is a kind of cool idea. So it would have been, you know, more complex serialized stories like we're getting in Star Trek Discovery, but it would have taken place in the year 3000, which is 600 years after Star Trek The Next Generation and all that, which is way in the future. So you can have a whole new brand slate with that. So
like how much can change in that amount of time,
so the
especially
pitch,
on like a galactic scale.
So the pitch was that the Federation is like in a period of complacency and stagnation, where it's like the Federation is very focused inward, and they don't explore anymore. They're just sort of defending their borders and like, we're the best, everything, all that. Sort of like, kind of like the stagnation of the Roman Empire. And then this new threat called the Scourge enters the picture, which would have compelled the Federation to build a new Enterprise and send them out into the first mission outside of Federation space for many years. And the main character would have been a Kirk, but it would have been a very different one. So I think that's kind of cool. That sounds like a cool idea.
Well, hold on. I have to ask a question, because what is this Scourge? Because that name could mean fucking anything.
I do not know. It's never really... let's see. I'm going to look it up, and I'm not sure. Let's see if I can find it. See, so it's like the Federation hasn't had a flagship in over 200 years. They haven't done anything scientifically or exploration since that long ago age. Let's see.
Yeah, keep skim reading, and because like the way I picture the Scourge, like immediately my brain just like snapped to Borg, and I was like, wait, there is already a thing like that, and it's the Borg. What can you tell me about the Reapers? I should go.
Let's see. So,
I'm
like,
Commander
here's
Shepard,
a kind
and
of a
this is my
breakdown of
favorite
it. Like,
store on the Citadel.
the humans are fat and happy, and they're complacent, and they're like focusing more on the righteousness of their own culture over all others. Many of the younger members of the Federation have left. The Vulcans have reunified with the Romulans, which is cool, because if you don't know, the Romulans are also our distant relatives of the Vulcans who left. The Bajorans are insular, and they're focused on religion, and it's like all more... They're like a planet-sized, sort of like a temple or a planet-sized religious center. The Klingons are warrior mystics, not just Vikings in space. And then they sort of like maintain maintain conquest and all that. Cardassians are philosophers and artists. Ferengi are not a joke, but they're quite powerful. They're capitalists and all that.
It sounds a lot like they really thought this through, because that's a lot of lore just thrown in there, you know, for other writers to explore.
The other thing is that the main character is also the XO, which is something that carried over to Star Trek Discovery. So there is this thing called the Sojourner incident, which Kirk was in, where there's a malevolent presence going after everybody, but I'm trying to see what it was. Is the threat of these, like, let's see. It doesn't say, but it's like some big threat. Alien obelisks and all this.
At least it's not a guy who wants revenge again.
So I think this is cool because so the obelisks are sort of like almost like the ones from 2001, which I think is cool because it's the point is that I'm trying to make with all this stuff is that I want something new and something different, like this Star Trek Federation pitch would have been. And I want something that's tonally similar to the original show, but more.
So it's not grand and epic and in your face and but it is humble, philosophical, little bit cheesy.
Yeah,
very inventive, and it comes up with a lot of cool new sci-fi concepts. That seems to me what Star Trek should be.
Yeah, that's what Star Trek.
As someone who's only seen the original series, the Kirk and Spock show. Which should have been the title. I feel like at this point it's a lot of stuff just getting recycled from that over and over and over again. But the way you describe the other shows, which I've only dabbled in, and watched
my favorite Star Trek shows.
I've watched like 4 or 5 episodes from each of those. It just seems like they always come up with something really cool and new and unique for each one of those shows, but then they just hit this wall where it's like, all right, we have to keep recycling the older stuff from the universe instead of inventing new stuff.
And this is why
it's sort of like this stagnation that Star Wars hit.
J.J. Abrams is responsible for the stagnation of Star Wars and Star Trek because he brought both of those franchises, unfortunately, back to their roots.
It's
in the worst
bring
possible
it back to
way
its roots in like a tonal way, and then there's just, all right, let's just start remaking stuff that we already did from a while ago. You know, like say what you want about Episode 7 of Star Wars, but you have to admit it's just a remake of Episode 4. Like the plot structure is exact. And there's not a whole lot of new concepts introduced. Like, everything is just kind of like a new, shinier version of something that you already saw.
Oh, gee, I wonder where I saw a giant sphere that can shoot lasers out and destroy planets before.
Oh, gee, these First Order troopers don't remind me of anything.
And they have great aim.
Hey, the Resistance? That sounds a lot like Rebellion.
So I guess I'm a little bit frustrated with Star Trek right now because it feels like it's stagnated. And honestly, I think this is kind of funny. But if you're a Star Trek fan, you should check out Axanar, because this is like a fan film that was made that's kind of cool. It's like sort of like a pseudo war documentary that was made about Star Trek, and it's kind of cool. You should check it out. It ran into some legal trouble with CBS and Paramount. But since then, it's exited from that, and I think they're going to try and remake it sometime soon. I'm not sure, though. But there's a prelude to Axanar, which you can look up on YouTube right now, which I think is kind of cool. I remember...
Isn't there a lot of, I mean, of course, it's mostly Star Trek fans, but aren't there, some cool actors in there?
There's some,
yeah, I'll do it.
Like Tony Todd, who played Worf's brother in the TNG is there. Like, a bunch of, actors from the show up. That's cool. That's the cool thing that's about Star Trek, is that a lot of the older actors just show up in Star Trek fan films, and I think that's kind of cool. Like Walter Koenig does that a lot.
Oh yeah, Walter Koenig. Which one did he show up in recently?
I can look it up.
I remember seeing an article about that. He's Chekhov, right?
Yeah. Walter Koenig. Let's see.
That's something I think a lot of other fan bases...
He was in Star Trek of Gods and Men, and Star Trek Renegades, Star Trek New Voyages.
Okay, that's something about that fan base that I feel like is really unique. Is just how uber passionate they are, to the point that they're actually really interacting with the people who actually work on the shows. Mm-hmm. Being a... I think being an actor in Star Trek means a lot more to people, back in the old days than it does now. But it was it was like an institution, man. Like it was a major facet of society was the whole Trek thing, and now it's just kind of like fizzled out, and it's just a movie, but to back then it used to mean a lot more, and I like the kind of camaraderie and friendship that like both the fans and the actual people.
It's just
had
a movie
on it.
With the explosions in space.
Yeah.
So let's see. He showed up in Star Trek of Gods and Men, Star Trek New Voyages, Star Trek Renegades, and Star Trek Captain Pike. So it's cool because just that, like, that's the one thing that I think is kind of crappy about CBS and Viacom really cracking down on copyrights when it comes to Star Trek, because you're smothering this great fan community of Star Trek fan films that I think is something really special that you don't see in any other.
You know what?
Franchise.
I mean, I know it's a mess of copyright problems, but if it were me, I would just start funding it and saying, yeah, these are canon. Like,
yeah,
I would totally be that guy.
Star Trek Continues. There's Star Trek Phase 2. There's Star Trek Hidden Frontier. There's Star Trek Odyssey, Star Trek The Helena Chronicles, Star Trek of Gods and Men, and Star Trek Axanar. So it's pretty cool to see all that fan stuff. And that's kind of where fan fiction got its start, honestly, with Star Trek.
Yeah. And now it's used for porn.
Yep.
All right, speaking of fan stuff, do you want to head on over to fan questions now, boy?
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, the first question here is, what would you guys do to fix modern Spider-Man comics?
I don't know. I don't.
Well, I'd cut Dan Slott's break line. All right, next question. If you were writing Marvel or DC Comics, would you reboot the whole universe again or try to fizzle everything out? Honestly, I feel like maybe DC's at a good spot with how it's been rebooted. Marvel could probably use like some kind of major event to re-spark itself, because the sales are down, fans are pissed off, the writers are all crazy people. I think something Marvel could sure benefit from is, and I know it's annoying because it just happened, but a like company-wide relaunch where it's not just new number ones and new storylines. I think they need to just start replacing like the staff too, like get some of the writers out of there and get in some like new young talent. Because I'm sure little Johnny, who just got out of college and is like excited to write his first Spider-Man story, he's not going to have the balls to start trying to put politics in there. He's going to just try and tell a cool story with a character he likes. He's not going to try and make some kind of political message about Trump or about Hillary. He's just going to fucking write a story. So give little Johnny fresh out of college his own Spider-Man book and just encourage new artists and new young talent. That's my idea.
So how's DC Rebirth going?
Very well. They basically just said, all right, everyone hated New 52, so let's just take what worked from that and what didn't, and then just start over from scratch and give people what they want. Like, they even completely in New 52, they completely rebooted a character, and it was Wally West, where they like, it was an alternate universe where he was black and had like a different personality, and he was like a kid growing up in the hood sort of thing, and it kind of upset everyone because they liked the wisecracking ginger guy that they already had as the character. So they just brought back old Wally West, and now he coexists alongside new Wally West, and it's like, well, now everyone's happy. Mm-hmm. Granted, it's a little weird that there's like two alternate universe versions of this guy. But then they also even brought back, like, the classic version of Superman, because for a while Superman's identity became public, and then he started running around in, like, a t-shirt and jeans, and he got kind of edgy, and then he started getting, like, 19 extra powers out of nowhere for no reason. So they're like, let's just bring back a more classic, regular version of Superman that doesn't have all these weird bits of baggage attached to him. And then the Batman stories immediately started off with, like, let's try and do this crazy mystery plot that's going to immediately make everyone go, wait, what? And I really want to see how the payoff goes for that, because basically they just revealed that the Joker might be 3 people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the identity of the Joker keeps switching, and that's why he's been kind of inconsistent over the decades. Like, there's 3 kind of generations of him. There's, like, the violent serial killer. There's the mafia crime guy who's just got, like, a sense of humor. And then there's the, like, harmless prankster. And there's
so it's
never really been a direct explanation for why he keeps
what you're
switching.
saying is that there's there's Cesar Romero Joker, who's just kind of a funny weirdo.
He just wants, like, control.
There's a Jack Nicholson Joker, who's a crime guy who just who got died and now acts weird. And there's Jared Leto
Heath
Joker.
Ledger. Well, Heath Ledger or Jared Leto, one of the two.
The same.
But, yes, there's, like, for every major generation of comics, Silver Age, Golden Age, Modern Age, there's been a different version of that character. So they decided to analyze that and go, what if there's a reason he's so wildly inconsistent, even down to the way he's drawn? And I think that's really cool. I mean, I don't know. I haven't been keeping up with the books, honestly. I just, like, paid attention to how everything kind of started off at Rebirth, and then was like, all right, I'm going to wait till this gets to, like, 25 issues, and I'm going to just start binge reading it. But for right now, I think it's very solid. It's, everything's going really well, and Marvel could absolutely take notes.
So yeah, I think that's about it for this week.
This is our shortest one yet. That I'm sure you're
shortest one
excited
this week.
about that. Less
it's
to
under
edit.
an hour. Yay!
Yay!
So we will see you. So we're gonna see you next week. We're gonna have some more discussions then. And remember, next week on Xavier's channel, not mine.
Although I'm sure if you're subscribed to one of us, you're probably subscribed to both.
Well, if you're subscribed to me,
you'll
you're subscribed to him. But if you're subscribed to him, then you may not be subscribed to me.
Remember recently when you just started going into your subscriptions or your subscribers and just scrolling down the list and you saw so many Spider-Man profile pics?
It's either my subscriptions or my
Twitter followers.
My Twitter followers. Yeah, let's see. Subscriptions. Let's do it for fun. I'll tell you how many Spider-Mans I find. Spider-Man. Spider-Man.
Yeah.
There's the Hulk.
Gonna be a couple of them.
Not that many Spider-Mans so far.
Really?
Spider-Man.
But did you check the names on the things? Because those might also have that.
Batman. Spider-Man. Spider-Man Geek 654. Thanks for your subscription. Spider-Man. 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 There we go. Now we're getting into the Spider-Mans. Spider-Man.
Yeah, I told you just got to read the names.
Spider-Man. Spider-Man.
And Spider-Man.
Spider-Man. Spider-Man. Spider-Man.
Is Spider-Man there?
Yeah, Spider-Man's there. Don't
Have you
forget
seen any
Spider-Man.
Spideys, though?
And Spider-Man. And Spider-Man. Oh, Star-Lord.
Sure, there's a couple of... Oh, Star-Lord. That's probably one of mine, too.
Spider-Man. In an intimate position with Spider-Man. Spider-Man and Spider-Man. And
There
I'm
you
sure
go.
there's more, but we don't have time to discuss the rest of them. Oh, there's you. You're in my
Yeah,
subscriptions.
so thanks everyone who's subscribed to David, whose name on Twitter and YouTube is Spider-Man. Please
or
comment.
their profile picture.
Or their profile picture. We love you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you for subscribing. Be sure to tell all your friends to subscribe. I know you're not supposed to say that because Xavier doesn't like me to, but I'm going to say it anyway. Subscribe.
You can say it all you want. I don't say it.
Like.
Like,
do all
comment,
those YouTube
share,
things.
subscribe, favorite, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, donate to my Patreon and my Kickstarter. Like, I hate all that. I hate how people end videos with those.
I did that.
Well, it's not a good idea, David.
Are we still friends
All right,
after
bye.
we became a soulless YouTube sellout?
And...